Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called What If, written by Coyote Havoc. By the human calendar, the date was July 6, 1945, 5:30 in Alamogordo, New Mexico. That was the exact date and time we noticed them on that dull blue speck they called Earth. They were a divided people, fighting each other across their entire planet. To be quite honest, we assumed that they would destroy themselves after they used two of the devices against an island nation called Japan. We figured that in a few short years, they would have irradiated their world, and all we would need to do was a short cleanup of their radioactive mess and report that we'd found the perfect world for colonization. Not even a footnote in the galactic history would remain. But they didn't. In fact, their governments developed newer and more powerful weapons than the ones employed, testing them in remote locations while their people went on about their day as if nothing had changed. Oh, there were warnings that it might happen, but they continued testing while using rudimentary conventional weapons in their continuing wars. Then we noticed that they were developing newer conventional weapons as well. Damn. 40 of their years later, a lot had changed in their advancement, and they had yet to eradicate themselves. The stubborn species was ruining everything, and something had to be done about those pesky humans who continued to kill each other in the most bizarre ways, and yet stubbornly refused to annihilate themselves. It was most inconvenient. They had gone so far as to use unoccupied craft to kill each other on their battlefields, while the person operating might as well have been playing a video game from their home entertainment system. It was appalling to say the least, and the constant source of frustration. But we had to stay our hand, doing nothing lest someone else stumble across their world as we had and, God forbid, do the right thing. Then one of the communications officers had a delightful idea. What if? We prepared a message containing the precise schematics of every conventional weapon they had created up to this point, ready to transmit to every nation in their local language. But we needed to test the idea first. We picked one specific airframe, the F-19 stealth fighter, from the nation that had first employed their atomic weapons against an enemy and released it as a toy manufacturing company. We were hesitant to see the results, theorizing that if everyone knew about their conventional weapons, the governments would have no choice but to resort to their nuclear weapons, and the long wait for their own annihilation would be over. It worked. The offspring of that nation scrambled to get the newest plastic models and toys of their most advanced airframe their country had ever developed, and the country itself denied its existence. We had even witnessed the airframe being tested over the unoccupied areas, and yet their revelation that it existed was denied. They even built a different aircraft, completely undoing their own identification pattern to cover up for the security breach. But some asked if it worked too well. We didn't care. Data collected screamed that a conspiracy to cover up the mistakes would take years to undo, and 80 years later, we released everything to everyone. That was a mistake. Governments were paralyzed as their citizens read the schematics in detail, and we began to celebrate the destruction of their species. Then we noticed something we had not anticipated. Instead of rudimentary transport vehicles, heavily augmented by their owners, showing up at Walmart parking lots, there were Abrams, Leopards, and T-14 tanks equipped with nitrous oxide, hydraulic lift kits, and undercarriage lifting systems. Su-57s were parked next to F-23s at the local airports around the planet like it was common to own these weapons. Scorpion IFEs became weekend projects for father and sons to enjoy at tank ranges across the world. Then the humans asked, what if? It began with a single human passing a beam of coherent energy through a matrix of isolated atoms and developing a particle cannon that would sweep their world who was hungry for the new weapon only to fire it at concrete targets. Then people went back to looking at old ideas to become new again, developing beam energy weapons and magnetic mass drivers. Their nuclear arsenals forgotten and their governments impotent to end the madness. We realized what we had done and called for a fleet to be dispatched immediately. These humans were too dangerous to be allowed to exist, and they advanced further and faster than predicted. Before the fleet could be amassed to rid the galaxy of this threat, they had developed inter-system drives and began to visit planets in their system. before the fleet was halfway to their system, they had surpassed our own technology. When the fleet had finally arrived, they were exposed to an advertisement on the side of the most powerful warship, boldly declaring the best barbecue to be found at the place called Elizabethan, Tennessee. Our fleet didn't stand a chance at the first annual Pluto death match, and the humans watched our defeat live on pay-per-view. It was humiliating. That is where the story comes in, Commander. I've sent this message back in time, knowing how much I enjoy the short stories, of how amazing the humans think they are. They are quite correct. If my calculations are right, you shall read this story and realize that I'm attempting to warn you, myself, from across the decades that have already come and gone for me. Our wife's name is Griselata. That should be enough proof for you. Listen carefully. If you value your career in species, do not send that message. Do not release their technology to their civilians. And absolutely do not ask the humans, what if? End of story. Story number 2. Secondhand Solutions, written by MarlynnOfMany. Mer gave me a smug look, curling and uncurling one tentacle like a yo-yo.
Told you it was a waste of your credits,
he said. I sighed. If those human ships were here, it wouldn't be. This stuff is prime Earth nostalgia. The small pile of items on the harvest there had seemed so full of promise when I'd bought it at our last stop. Cat posters, harmonicas, and a dozen packs of goofy eyes.
Pity we're far from Earth,
Mer said. Yeah, I agreed, eyeing the locals of this alien marketplace. Lots of scales and exoskeletons. Not many hands would appreciate the softness of a cat's fur, and very few mouthparts that would be able to do much with a harmonica. The merchant I'd gotten the stuff from had been a heat seeker, all too happy to unload her stock of cut-rate human nonsense. These folks would likely have similar opinions, I said.
At least it doesn't expire.
Mer straightened the individually boxed harmonicas.
And it shouldn't take up too much space in your quarters until we meet up with the humans eventually. The captain won't want to hang around here waiting for them to show up.
True, I admitted. It was gossip from our last stop that had told me that they had been here now. I should have known better than to trust it.
Well, back to the ship,
Mer announced.
Maybe you can cheer yourself up by decorating your quarters with eyeballs.
I had to smile at that. Maybe. He was already walking back to where we'd parked, on the far side of the overcultivated garden area. I towed the harvest sled after him. Then I caught sight of some locals who'd run afoul of multiple bird-like beasties, and an idea started to form. The locals, a half-dozen heat-seekers whose scales ranged from red to pale yellow, were trying to eat a nice lunch at a dining section of the garden. The squawking bird things, which were half lizardly with speckled brown feathers and white beaks, had apparently claimed the bushes for their own. They were contesting the claim by spitting at the heat-seekers every time their backs were turned. These looked like pretty gross spitballs, impressive for birds. It occurred to me that I've seen those feathery characters all over the place here. They look behind confirmed it. They lurked in nearly every tree I could see, and judging by the way the locals were abandoning the picnic table, they were a known hazard. They still only spat at fleeing enemies, hiding or freezing in place when pinned by eye contact. And there was my idea.
Hey, Mer, I said, I'll bet you one shanty sung on the table that I can sell some of these googly eyes right now.
He stopped dead and looked around, full of skepticism.
To who?
Do you want to make the bet?
Sure.
There's no way anyone here is interested. You say that now, I've said, grabbing a pack and waving down one of the hurrying locals. But you don't know how we deal with tigers and magpies.
With what?
I didn't answer, busy as I was explaining to the locals that the false eyes were adhesive and would give an impression of eye contact from both directions. They were just as interested as I thought they'd be. After a demonstration, during which I strolled through the picnic area and didn't get a single spitball on me, the birds were unsettled, and the locals were more than happy to buy everything I had. There was a new colony town, you see, and no one had come up with a good solution for the annoying fauna that came with the territory. These folks were prepared to make everyone stay. They certainly made mine. That was 5 times as much as I paid for the stuff in the first place, and they didn't even want the posters and harmonicas. I waved goodbye, but they weren't paying attention, so I turned my grin on Mer instead. He had draped a tentacle around his pointy squid head in exasperation.
I knew I shouldn't have taken the bet, he declared, but I was so sure that it was pointless.
And I'm sure that whichever song you choose to regale us with at dinner time will be delightful, I said, tugging the hovercraft around the bushes. The birch watched me carefully, noting the eyes still stuck on my hair, and leaving us both alone. If it's a song I know, maybe I can play backup melody with a harmonica. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.